They say ignorance is bliss, but what they don't tell you is that curiosity can ruin your life. Trust me, I learned the hard way. It started with a phone and ended with a discovery I can't unsee. For months, I had been noticing it. My wife's phone practically becoming an extension of her hand. Whether she was on the couch, at the dinner table, or brushing her teeth, it was always there, glowing softly like a siren's beacon. At first, I chalked it up to work. She'd been busier than usual with a big project at her firm, or so she said, and it made sense that she'd need to stay connected. But there's a fine line between staying connected and being completely absorbed. She started laughing at messages she'd never share, tucking her phone away when I walked into the room, and making vague excuses whenever I asked what was so funny. It was like watching someone grow a second life in the palm of their hand. One night, the tension finally got to me. She'd fallen asleep on the couch after a long day, her phone still clutched in her hand like a lifeline. Normally, I wouldn't even think about touching it, boundaries, trust, all that. But something about the way she'd been acting lately gnawed at me, an itch I couldn't ignore. The screen lit up as I picked it up, and my heart stopped. There it was, bold as day, a notification from a dating app I'd never seen her use before. I stared at it, disbelief coursing through me. A dating app? My wife? I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Maybe it was a mistake, I told myself. Maybe it was one of those spam apps you get tricked into downloading. But the doubt was already planted. I swiped, and that's when I saw it. Her gallery. Dozens of photos I'd never seen before. These weren't your typical vacation selfies or brunch shots with friends. No, these were different. Flattering lighting, carefully chosen angles. Outfits that I'd certainly never seen her wear around me. To say I was stunned would be an understatement. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. These weren't the kind of photos you keep for yourself. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the phone as my mind raced. Was this real? Was I overreacting? 1,000 scenarios played out in my head, each one worse than the last. I put the phone back exactly as I'd found it, my hands trembling. She never stirred, and I sat across the room, staring at her peaceful face, wondering how much of our life together had been a lie. That night, I didn't sleep. It wasn't just the photos or the dating app. It was the sinking feeling that I was about to discover how deep this betrayal went. If I thought the dating app and the photos were bad, what came next was the kind of behavior you'd expect from someone auditioning for the role of worst spouse of the year. It wasn't just her phone anymore. Her whole routine had started to change, like she was living a double life right in front of me. The late-night outings were the first clue. At first, it was innocent enough. Dinners with friends, she said, or casual walks to clear her head. I wasn't the type to hover or question her need for personal time. Everyone needs space, right? But when those outings started happening 2-3 times a week, always after dark, and always ending well past midnight, I started to wonder if I was the one being left in the dark. And then there was the jogging. She'd never been much of a runner before. Her idea of cardio was chasing after sales racks during holiday season. But suddenly, she was lacing up her sneakers and heading out for evening runs. Long runs. Too long if you ask me. No one comes back from a jog 3 hours later, refreshed and glowing like they've just walked off a magazine cover. The wardrobe changes sealed the deal. My wife had always had a practical, understated style, neutrals, comfy sweaters, nothing flashy. But suddenly, she was walking around the house in outfits I hadn't seen since our early days of dating. Tight dresses, heels, bold colors. It was like she'd raided the wardrobe of her younger, single self. I made the mistake of asking her about it once casually. "Oh, just wanted to change," she said with a shrug, like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal. A huge one. Because I knew those outfits weren't for me. I started noticing the little details. The way she'd carefully pick out her clothes before these so-called outings with friends. The way she'd spend extra time in front of the mirror, fixing her makeup or reapplying perfume. And it wasn't her usual subtle scent either. No, this was the kind of perfume you wear when you want to leave an impression on someone else. The nights she was out with the girls always felt off. If I asked about her plans, she'd keep it vague. Just catching up, she'd say, her tone light and dismissive. But if I probed any deeper, her mood would shift like I was crossing some invisible line. I even tried to meet her friends casually one evening, suggesting we all grab drinks together. Her response? Oh, they're not really your type of crowd. You'd be bored. That stung. Her friends and I had always gotten along fine before. What had changed? The worst part was that I didn't need to dig far to feel the truth creeping in. It was in the way she avoided eye contact, the sudden silences when her phone buzzed, and the fact that she'd started leaving her phone in the car during these mysterious outings. So I can focus, she'd explained once, but I didn't buy it. It felt like I was living with a stranger, someone I couldn't quite recognize, but who looked a lot like the woman I'd married. And the more I watched, the more I realized this wasn't paranoia. This was a storm brewing, and I was standing in its path. After weeks of watching her strange behavior, I knew I couldn't keep living in limbo. I needed answers, real ones, before deciding whether there was any point in continuing our marriage. So I did something drastic. Some might call it invasive. I called it survival. I created the ultimate trap. The plan was simple but brilliant. I set up a profile on the dating app I'd seen on her phone, crafting a persona I knew would be irresistible to her. Tall, successful, well-traveled, with just the right blend of mystery and charm. Every word was calculated, every photo carefully chosen to match her type. I wasn't proud of it, but at this point, pride wasn't on the table. It didn't take long. Within hours of the profile going live, there she was like a moth to a flame. Her profile picture, a carefully curated shot of her smiling coyly in one of those new dresses, stared back at me. I almost laughed. Seeing your wife on a dating app you created is surreal in a way that makes you question reality itself. I matched with her, of course. I waited a few hours before messaging her, letting the tension build. When I finally sent the first message, a witty, harmless opener, she responded in minutes. And just like that, the floodgates opened. At first, her messages were polite, almost guarded. But as I turned on the charm, she began to loosen up. The flirtation was immediate and shameless. She complimented my looks, joked about how hard it was to find a real connection, and even mentioned how rare it was to meet someone as thoughtful as me. I could feel my blood boiling as I read each line. The real shock came when I asked her about her relationship status. Without hesitation, she replied, single. Haven't found the right person yet. Single. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Not married. Not committed. Single. She didn't stop there. Within a few exchanges, she was suggesting we meet in person, saying things like, I feel like I've known you forever and I could really see something special with you. I sat there, staring at my phone, unable to decide whether to laugh or scream. This wasn't just infidelity. It was reckless, juvenile, and pathetic. The most ironic part? While she was pouring her heart out to Mr. Perfect, she was sitting just a room away, scrolling on her phone like nothing was happening. I could hear her faint laughter at whatever meme or video she was watching. It was almost comical that I was catching her red-handed without her having the slightest clue. Then came the moment that broke the thin thread of sanity I was clinging to. While we were chatting on the app, I casually walked into the living room and asked to borrow her phone. I told her I wanted to upload some family photos from her gallery to the cloud. Her reaction was instant and visceral. She yanked her phone back like it was a precious artifact, her face a mixture of panic and anger. Why do you need my phone? Can't you just use yours? She snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. The aggression in her voice was almost laughable, considering how calm and flirtatious she was just moments earlier, albeit to a fictional version of me. I shrugged, playing it off, but in that moment, the mask she'd been wearing for months shattered completely. It was surreal, knowing I had all the proof I needed while she sat there, guarding her phone like it held state secrets. She had no idea I was the one behind the messages, the one she was so eager to meet. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling, I knew there was no coming back from this. She'd failed the test spectacularly, and I had one final move to make. After the stunt with the phone, I knew I couldn't stop there. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but I needed the full picture. If I was going to confront her, it had to be airtight, no denials, no excuses, no room for gaslighting. So, I kept going. Our relationship on the dating app blossomed in ways that would have been funny if they weren't so tragic. Every message she sent as she poured her fantasies into Jake, the man she thought I was, felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. She didn't just flirt. She practically threw herself at me. It started innocently enough. She'd tell Jake how refreshing it was to talk to someone who truly understood her. She gushed about how she'd felt disconnected for years and how meeting him felt like a breath of fresh air. Meanwhile, I was sitting a room away, reading these messages while she lounged on the couch, scrolling Instagram like her double life wasn't unraveling in real time. Then the conversations took a turn. She began dropping hints about wanting to explore new things, her tone playful but unmistakably suggestive. When I played along, pretending to be intrigued, she escalated. Before long, she was sharing details about her unfulfilled desires and how much she craved excitement, things she had never mentioned to me once in our actual marriage. The kicker? She casually suggested meeting up at a hotel halfway across town, emphasizing how discreet it would be. No strings attached, just us, she wrote, as though she were planning a casual coffee date. I nearly dropped my phone when I read it, but it didn't stop there. I started digging deeper, knowing there had to be more. Her laptop was the obvious next step. She was notoriously careless with her devices, often leaving them open and unlocked. One evening, when she left for one of her infamous jogs, I seized the opportunity. The moment I opened her laptop, my suspicions were confirmed. Her dating app profile was still logged in, and it was worse than I imagined. It wasn't just me, Jake. She'd been chatting with multiple men, each conversation more explicit than the last. One thread with a guy named Chris stood out. They'd been talking for weeks, planning elaborate rendezvous that made my stomach churn. Chris was apparently her gym buddy, a detail that explained why her runs always seemed to last longer than a marathon. Another chat with a guy named Brandon revealed she'd gone out with him for drinks while I'd been working late to pay for her self-care lifestyle. Her messages were filled with coy flirtation, promises of future meetups, and even a few pictures she'd clearly taken in our bedroom when I wasn't home. Ah yes, the pictures. Among the most grotesque discoveries were the photos she sent to these men. She'd taken them in the same house we shared, the same bed we slept in. Some were taken in the mirror of our bathroom, others on the couch where we watched movies together. There were even a few in my home office, which she apparently used as her personal photo studio when I wasn't around. What made it so much worse, and in a twisted way, hilarious, was that she was now sending these same photos to Jake. She'd carefully pose, adjust the lighting, and send them with captions like, "Thought you'd like this," or "Wish you were here," all while I was sitting downstairs, drinking my coffee or watching TV, completely invisible to her. It was almost cartoonish in its absurdity. I couldn't decide whether to laugh, cry, or throw up. Here was my wife, sitting just feet away from me, sending racy photos to her own husband without realizing it. It was like something out of a dark comedy, except it wasn't funny when you were the punchline. By the time she returned from her jog that night, flushed and glowing, I had everything I needed. Screenshots of her messages, saved photos, and even a few choice quotes from her conversations with other men. The laptop was a treasure trove of evidence. As she kissed me on the cheek, her usual casual affection, I couldn't help but think how oblivious she was to the storm brewing right under her nose. She had no idea that her entire web of lies was about to collapse, and I was holding every strand. When you've been betrayed, there's a part of you that wants to scream and throw things. But me? I wanted something better, something calculated, something that would not only expose her lies, but leave her with a sense of poetic justice she'd never forget. It wasn't just revenge, it was theater. The plan came together slowly, piece by piece, like assembling a jigsaw puzzle of destruction. I had the evidence, the screenshots, the photos, the messages. But it wasn't enough for me to just confront her privately. No, this needed to be a show. A public, undeniable, humiliating revelation that would leave no room for her to wriggle out. The first step was to secure the venue. I called a local cafe that had a small karaoke setup and a projector, pitching the idea of hosting a celebration. I told them it was for a special anniversary event. Nothing unusual in a tight-knit community where people love a good excuse to gather. They were happy to oblige, even offering to decorate with balloons and streamers. Perfect. Next, I compiled the evidence into a video. But this wasn't just a dry slideshow of texts and photos. No, it was a masterpiece. I edited it with care, adding captions, dramatic music, and even a few comedic sound effects to emphasize just how absurd her actions had been. When she sent me flirty messages on the app, I juxtaposed them with clips of her sitting on the couch next to me. Her jogging selfies were paired with footage of me working late at my desk, completely unaware of her lies. I even added a section titled Greatest Hits, a montage of her most incriminating messages to Jake, Chris, Brandon, and the other men she'd been juggling. Then I worked on the guest list. For her, I used her weakness against her. As Jake, I invited her to a special evening at the cafe. I told her I had something important to share and that it would be a night she'd never forget. She fell for it instantly, agreeing without hesitation. For everyone else, her family, friends, and even a few co-workers, I sent invites from my own phone, framing it as a surprise celebration for her recent career success. I made sure to emphasize how much it would mean to her if they came. The RSVP list filled up faster than I expected. Apparently, people love free food and karaoke. Everything was falling into place. The cafe staff agreed to help me with the technical side of things, ensuring the projector would be ready and the video would play seamlessly. I even arranged for the karaoke microphone to cut out mid-song when I needed to take the stage. On the night of the event, I dressed sharp and played my part as the loving husband. When people arrived, I greeted them warmly, shaking hands and thanking them for coming. Kate arrived right on schedule, beaming with excitement. She had no idea what was waiting for her. The cafe was packed, the atmosphere buzzing with energy. People were eating, laughing, and taking turns singing their favorite songs. Kate seemed relaxed, thinking this was just another one of those gatherings where she could bask in the glow of her social circle. As the night wore on, I gave a subtle nod to the cafe staff. The lights dimmed, and the music stopped. I took the microphone, my heart pounding, but my resolve unshaken. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I said, my voice steady but laced with purpose. "We're here to celebrate someone very special, my wife, Kate." The applause was polite, filled with the kind of obligatory cheer that comes with any surprise celebration. Kate's smile radiated confidence as she soaked up the attention, utterly unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. I let the moment hang in the air, savoring the irony of her pride. "But tonight isn't just about celebrating Kate's success," I said, my tone shifting, my gaze locking onto hers. The air grew heavier, the room quieter, as people began to sense something wasn't quite right. "Tonight, we're here to honor another quality. Honesty, or rather, the lack of it." Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. I nodded to the cafe staff, and the lights dimmed. The projector flickered to life, casting a bright glow on the screen behind me. Let's take a look at some of Kate's recent achievements. The first slide appeared, a screenshot of her dating app profile, complete with her bio that boldly declared, "Single and ready for something real." Confused murmurs rippled through the room. Kate froze, her smile gone, her posture stiffening. "This," I continued, my voice sharp but calm, "is how Kate spends her time when she's not out working late or on one of her famous jogs. Let's see what else she's been up to." The next slide transitioned to her messages with Jake. The flirty exchanges, the blatant lies about her marriage, the suggestive selfies. Each one more damning than the last. Gasps erupted from the crowd as they read the captions I'd added for clarity, such as "This was sent while I was cooking dinner for her," or "Taken in our shared bedroom." Kate's face drained of color. Her hands clutched the edge of the table, and her eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. But there was none. The audience was glued to the screen, horrified yet unable to look away. "And it doesn't stop there," I said, advancing the slides. Kate didn't just reserve her charm for Jake. Let's meet some of the other lucky men. The screen showed snippets of her conversations with Chris, the gym buddy, followed by Brandon, her after-work drinks partner. Each exchange was paired with photos. Her in outfits I'd never seen, poses that made my stomach churn, all taken in places that had once felt like home. The murmurs turned into exclamations. Kate's friends whispered furiously, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Her parents sat motionless, their faces masks of shock and disappointment. I wasn't finished. To make it even more entertaining, I said, advancing to the next segment, let's hear directly from Kate. I hit play on an audio recording. Her voice, unmistakable, laughing and flirting with Richard, a name I hadn't even mentioned yet. Her words, dripping with suggestive undertones, filled the room. The crowd fell silent, their discomfort palpable. Kate shot up from her seat, her voice trembling. "Matthew, stop this. This is insane," she cried, her panic now fully unleashed. I ignored her. The final slide appeared, a bold caption that read, "The truth always comes out, sometimes it just needs a little push." The room sat in stunned silence, the weight of what they'd just witnessed sinking in. Kate's gaze darted from her parents to her friends, who all avoided her eyes. Her carefully constructed facade had crumbled into dust. But I wasn't done. I picked up the microphone again, turning to Kate. "You thought you could lie to me, cheat on me, and make me out to be a fool. But tonight, everyone sees the truth. Everyone sees you." The cafe doors opened, and two cafe staff wheeled out a large cake I'd ordered. The message on top, written in bright red icing, read, "Congratulations on your freedom, Kate." The crowd erupted, not with applause, but with a mix of shocked laughter, horrified whispers, and awkward coughs. Kate stood frozen, her face contorted with rage and humiliation. I turned back to the guests. "And let's not forget the real star of the show, Jake." I smiled bitterly. "Yes, Kate, I'm Jake. The man you've been pouring your heart out to. The man you were so eager to meet for a secret hotel rendezvous. It was me the whole time." A ripple of gasps and murmurs swept through the room. Kate's head snapped up, her face a mask of horror as realization dawned. "You were chatting with your husband," I said, my voice dripping with irony. "Every flirtatious message, every secret fantasy, every compromising photo, you were sending them to me. And let me tell you, reading your texts about how single and unfulfilled you are, hilarious. By the way," I added, "your bags are packed. They're waiting outside in your car. I'll be filing for divorce first thing tomorrow." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked at her parents, who were glaring at her in stunned disbelief. She turned to her friends, but they were already backing away, unwilling to associate themselves with the disaster unfolding before them. With one final glance at the crowd, I raised my glass and said, "To honesty and fresh starts." I drained the glass and walked out the door, leaving the chaos behind me. As I stepped into the night air, I felt a weight lift off my chest. The truth had been exposed, and the world I'd built with her was gone. But in its place was freedom, a clean slate to start anew, while she dealt with the rubble of her own making. Kate's life became a cautionary tale. Her parents cut ties, labeling her an embarrassment to the family. Friends abandoned her after seeing the video, unwilling to associate with someone so brazenly deceitful. Even her former lovers ghosted her once they realized they'd been part of a public spectacle. She tried to rebuild by moving to a new town, but the internet never forgets. Clips of the video surfaced online, turning her into a local meme and a viral example of what not to do in a marriage. Her attempts to find new work stalled as whispers about her personal life followed her. Meanwhile, my life flourished. The divorce granted me the house, the car, and the satisfaction of watching her face consequences for every lie. I sold the house, moved to a new city, and embraced my freedom. Therapy, new hobbies, and new friendships reminded me of the man I was before her betrayal. Kate wanted a new life. She got it, but not the way she planned. I walked away stronger, with a clean slate and a story that ensured I'd never settle for less than I deserved again. Victory never tasted so sweet,